Good morning, dear students. Today we are going to discuss the last point of the background of Victorian literature called Victorian prose as social commentary. Victorian age is essentially the age of the novel. During this period, novel made a phenomenal progress. This was partly because this essentially middle class form of literary art was bound to flourish increasingly as the middle classes rose in power and importance, partly because of the steady increase of the reading public with the growth of lending libraries, the development of publishing in the modern sense, and other phenomena which accompanied this increase, and partly because the novel was the vehicle best equipped to present a picture of life lived in a given society against a stable background of social and moral values by people who were recognizably like the people encountered by readers. And this was the kind of picture of life the middle class reader wanted to read about. The early Victorian novel, as cultivated by Disraeli, Trollope, Dickens, Thackeray, Kingsley, Mrs. Gaskell, and Charles Reade, was essentially a transcript from life. And instead of seeking inspiration from the Middle Ages or the world of romance, the early Victorian novelist concentrated on the social, political, economic aspects of Victorian society. Realism, sometimes blatant and sometimes in the subdued key, became a characteristic feature of early Victorian novel. The novelist came to close grips with the problems facing Victorian society and sought to find a solution to rampant evils of the age. The novel, like other forms of literature, became pervasive in character and ceased to be a source of pure entertainment. The Victorian novel reader did not want to be entertained, and in a sense he wanted to escape. But he wanted to be entertained with a minimum of literary convention, a minimum of aesthetic distance. He wanted to be close to what he was reading about, to have as little suspension of disbelief as possible, to pretend indeed that literature was journalism, that fiction was history. The Victorian reader found in fiction what he looked for, and early Victorian novelist provided him a historical perspective of the age in all its varied aspects. The early Victorian novelists were in accord with their public and gratified the public's taste by their end-living pictures of life. They were conditioned by it. Of course, any novelist must be, but for the most part were willingly conditioned by it. They identified themselves with their age and were its spokesmen. No doubt there is presence of the satiric spirit of Disraeli and Thackeray, but in spite of the satiric shafts, the novelists do not show particular disgust with the age. There is plenty of irony and plain thrust in Dickens, but he is well satisfied with the age in which he lived. For all the squalor, sin and pain in the novels of Dickens, the impression left on reading any one of them is that he believed as implicitly as Leibniz that this is the best of all possible worlds. The early Victorian novelists did not very much bother about coherent plots. The structure of the novel in the hands of Disraeli, Dickens, and Thackeray is loose, and the progress of the story is hampered by episodic intrusions, unconnected descriptions, and moral sermons by the novelist. The novels of Dickens, the chief among the early novelists of the Victorian age, are often like shapeless bags into which all manner of different objects of varying shapes and sizes have been ruthlessly crammed. They contain something for everybody, and the parts you do not like you can more or less ignore. The same formlessness is perceptible in the novels of Thackeray. To quote Lord David Cecil again, Thackeray was a very uncertain craftsman. His hold on structure is very slack. He does not bother to view the different strands in his theme together. Loose ends dangle in the air. No careful revision has cut out the tufts of unnecessary material that have accumulated during the hurry of first writing. The early novelists of the Victorian age had a love for history, and in spite of realistic touches in their fiction, we can find them working in the line of historical fiction left by Sir Walter Scott. Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities, Thackeray's Henry Esmond, Kingsley's Westward Ho, Charles Reade's The Cloister and The Hearth are historical novels of the age. In the next class, we will discuss about the Victorian novels as a social force in the 19th century. Thank you.